Hey guys, I'm back, just coming off of my round 2 game with Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez. The game finished in a draw, and it was a pretty solid game. Weren't a lot of swings, but there was definitely quite a bit of strategic fight, so there was a lot of interesting moments. Um, I played Alejandro a few times before. I don't know our exact record, but I think I have one draw and one or two losses, something like that. Um, but in any case, I had white in this game, so I was feeling like, I can definitely fight for an advantage at least. We played d4, e6, c4, and b6. So he's actually played this a few times recently. So this was one of the lines I was preparing for this game. I was mainly expecting the Benko Gambit, which is I think his main opening, but this was another thing I looked at. And yeah, I thought this move a3 was pretty interesting here. The main line against this opening, I think this is called English defense, is typically to play e4 and just grab the center. But I wasn't exactly sure what he wanted to do here. And this line is pretty sharp. And yeah, I just felt like if I'm not well prepared here, then it's super risky to go for this. So I decided to just kind of do something more sensible. So a3 is interesting because it covers the b4 square, so now black doesn't have bishop b4 check, and black is kind of relegated to playing Queen's Indian style, which I was perfectly comfortable with. So knight c3, and now black has a choice. I think the main line is to play knight f6, and then white will typically play something like knight f3 here. And we transpose to the Queen's Indian with a3, the Petrosian system. Black typically plays d5, and there's a lot of theory here. But Alejandro decided to play d5 here. So, okay, seems reasonable. I take on d5, e takes d5. And here I started to think. So I had a couple of options here. My first idea was just to play bishop f4 and just kind of develop like Queen's Gambit style. And I think white can fight for a small edge here. I just play like e3, knight f3, bishop d3, rook c1, and kind of simple chess. And that looks very healthy and playable for white. But instead I decided to fianchetto with g3. And my reasoning for this is normally against the Queen's Indian, I am doing the fianchetto variation. So just to show quickly, let's say d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6, g3. There's a line here that runs bishop a6, b3, check, bishop d2, bishop e7, knight c3, d5, white takes, bishop g2, castles, castles, and then black often goes bishop b7 here. And this is kind of the position I was trying to compare to what we got in the game. And I figured here, white's bishop is kind of misplaced on d2. It actually would be better on c1, because then at least it can go to b2 in many lines where it's well placed. Or I can put it on f4, and that just costs like another tempo. But going back to the game, I was trying to compare, how how similar it is. And I think it's reasonably similar that my choice kind of makes sense. So d5 takes, I play g3. And now, yeah, we could very easily get that same position where instead of b3, I've played a3, which I think is more useful to cover the b4 square and support a potential b4 in the future. Okay, anyways, after g3, black played knight f6, bishop g2. And here, I mean, he was deciding where to put the dark-scored bishop. Bishop d6 is the move black would like to play. But then he has to already watch out for like knight b5, and the bishop has to go back, and maybe white can play bishop f4. And this is slightly annoying for black. Or also possible is a move like bishop g5. And hitting the d5 pawn, and if black plays c6, white often can play a move like e4 here, and kind of fight for the initiative. I'm not sure if this was exactly what he was annoyed about, but he played the move c6. Which is very reasonable, just defending the pawn and preparing bishop d6. Now already I was thinking about what to do here. I really wanted to play knight h3, because I thought this made a lot of sense. If bishop d6, bishop f4, and eventually these bishops get traded and my knight can come to the f4 square, where I think it'll be pretty well placed. From f4 it can go to d3, and I definitely like white's position here. But what bothered me is that maybe black changes his mind and just plays like bishop e7. And then I usually want to put my bishop on f4 in this position, but now my knight needs to go to f4, and so here my pieces would feel kind of clumsy fighting over the f4 square. And then I'd be asking, why isn't my knight on f3? So eventually I just decided to keep it solid and play knight f3. Black played bishop d6, castles, and he decided to play knight d7. So here actually I considered the strongest move, but I definitely underestimated how good it was. And then later I checked with Stockfish, and Stockfish really likes this idea to play knight h4. So the idea is pretty simple. I just want to play knight f5. If black plays g6, stopping this, then white comes in with bishop h6, bishop f8, and I just defend the bishop with queen d2. And if takes, well, black still isn't able to castle and just has a pretty difficult position. And white's probably just going to try to break open with e4 soon and put a rook on the e-file, and it's very difficult for black. Just can't castle the king and doesn't find safety. Going queenside, yeah, not really such a great option here because white has a lot of open lines on the queenside as well. So after knight h4, instead of black castles, this is what I was more unclear about. I thought knight f5, bishop c7, and yeah, I didn't really see such a great follow-up here for white. I figured it probably is something like white definitely has some initiative, maybe with like e4, but yeah, during the game I just wasn't clear, and I didn't really want to enter this position. But okay, I checked with Stockfish and it says like rook e1, for example. Really interesting move. And if g6, I give a check, king g7, bishop g5. And the next move I just break with e4. And according to the engine, this position is winning for white. Not that we would have gotten this, of course, but it's just kind of a nice instructive line as to how white could play the position. So yeah, after knight h4, I'm not sure what black does. Maybe he has to go for g6 and just try to play that position with bishop h6. It's not really clear. But yeah, and eventually I ended up going for queen to c2, which I thought was kind of just like a natural move. He castled, and I broke with e4 here. So I thought I might be getting some advantage here, or at least some pressure in the lines that follow, but I'm not really sure. I think he's able to equalize. But nevertheless, it was still pretty interesting. So it takes knight g5. And now bishop e7. He's kind of getting out of the way of knight takes e4, which makes sense. I take on e4. Knight takes e4. And here I decided to take with the queen. Stockfish said I should have played knight takes e4, which was definitely my first choice, but I really wasn't clear about c5, what to do here. Because if I take on c5, then knight takes c5, and if I take again, black just takes on g2, and white has, absolutely nothing. But yeah, it turns out I have this move rook to d1, and apparently black is under some pressure here. Because cd4, rook takes d4, and this pin is pretty annoying, and my next move is just like bishop e3 and rook ad1. And yeah, this looks pretty serious for white. So, in case of knight takes e4, c5, I don't think black has to play this move. This is just kind of the move I was most worried about. Yeah, I guess white is getting some initiative here. Because if black doesn't take on d4, white is probably ready to take on c5, or in some cases, push d5. So, okay, queen takes e4. I wanted to keep him restricted. Knight f6, queen d3. Queen d7, bishop f4. Now the game progresses, I think, very logically. We're just both getting our pieces into the game. Black could have played c5 here and tried to break free. My response likely would have been d5, keeping some space. Then probably bishop d6, and yeah, during the game I thought white is probably slightly better here, but maybe not much. Stockfish thinks it's like totally equal, so yeah, white just has 0 advantage. This pawn is super well blockaded. So, okay, black could have done that. Instead he played rook e8, rook e1, and h6. So, I thought this was an important moment because now it's like all my pieces are perfectly developed, but there's no really obvious plan for white. So I spent some time here. Eventually I came up with an interesting move, queen f1. And it's actually, creating a threat in the position, which is not easy to do, but bishop h3 is pretty serious. Just trapping black's queen. So black has to be very precise here. Alejandro took his time. Eventually he found bishop d6. I don't remember if I checked this with the engine. I think it's the only move. At least during the game I thought this was the only move that black could play, as it creates a square on c7 for the queen. Okay, so I decided to play bishop e5. Just kind of keeping the tension. If he takes d5, this felt very unpleasant for black. I wasn't sure exactly what move I would play here. Like maybe f4, for example. Or I was also considering just taking on d5 right away, planting the rook on d4 and just playing this position where his light square bishop is super passive. I can try to play like f4, f5, queen f4. If white gets all of these things in, then it seems like I should be able to push very nicely. But yeah, he found the much better move, queen f5, which I definitely underestimated, but black kind of holds everything together. And he just covers the threat of bishop takes f6, and he doesn't have to double his pawns, he can take with the queen. So now I really had another decision to make. I really thought long about bishop h3, because this seems like the most concrete move. Then black probably plays queen g6. And then my first thought was f4, but this really looked way too aggressive and like it seemed like I was probably just gonna create more weaknesses to him to exploit later on. For instance, he has like this move c5, and it's like his bishop is now opening up, and I think my king on g1 doesn't feel secure at all. And the engine confirms that black is doing absolutely fine here. So I'm happy I didn't push too hard and go for this super aggressive approach. In the end, I decided to just keep it super solid and just take on f6. And this initiates a lot of trades where I thought maybe white might be able to fight for something. The point was after queen f6, knight e4, I'm getting his dark square bishop, and I'm leaving myself with kind of a good bishop versus bad bishop situation. The problem is that he only has this like one weakness on c6, and I have a weak pawn on d4, and so, well, neither side is really able to do much. So once we got here, I kind of realized any potential advantage I had is most likely gone, and I just tried to keep it solid and not lose the game at this point. I figured already here I could force a draw with like d5, but I didn't see the need to have to calculate something just to force a draw. I felt like my position is solid enough. I should be able to just play normally. Probably most accurate move was f4, which is kind of interesting, and just going for this nice setup with king f2 and bishop f3, and white is in total control. I played bishop f3 first, king f8, king g2, rook d6, bishop e4, king e7, and then I pushed f4 here. I kind of realized, I just need to put my king somewhere on e3, and there's nothing black can really do. At this point, I was definitely content with a draw, just because I felt like I had no advantage, and okay, might as well draw the game and go home. And that's basically what happened. We played a couple more moves, king f2, rook e7, and rook e1. And now, if black doesn't want to trade rooks, he has to kind of sidestep with rook d7, and this seems pretty pointless from black's point of view, because it allows like rook e8, and then I have bishop g4 coming. I mean, if only white can really be better here. So he decided to just take on e1, and we agreed to draw, because the endgame after king takes e1 is going to be pretty trivially drawn for both sides. Alright, well, that was not the most exciting game, but definitely a pretty solid effort. I'm happy that I didn't really blunder anything, and I managed to pose at least a couple questions with white to a strong player. So it definitely felt like an interesting game, and I think I need to analyze a little bit more, especially these lines after knight h4, to see exactly how like white's initiative could have developed from here. But yeah, now I'm on 1.5 out of 2, and going into round 3 tomorrow. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.